You didn't change anything. You didn't get a raise, you didn't move, you didn't buy new appliances, you've been reasonably careful, not obsessively careful, but careful enough. And somehow, quietly, without a single decision you can point to, your electricity bill is higher than it was 2 years ago. Not dramatically, not in a way that made you call someone, just higher, enough to notice, not enough to understand why. Most people assume it's inflation, the vague, invisible force that gets blamed for everything now, and that's partly true. But there's something else sitting underneath that number on your bill, something specific, something with a name. And once you understand what it is, you're going to look at every AI product you use, every chatbot, every smart tool, every assistant that promises to save you time and money very differently. Because here's what almost nobody has said clearly yet. The technology being sold to you as a financial tool is one of the primary engines behind why your electricity bill keeps climbing. You are paying for it twice, once on your subscription receipt, once on your utility statement. And the second payment is the one they never mention in the product demo. We're going to get into exactly how that works. The number that ties it all together is going to surprise you, and I'll come back to it at exactly the right moment. Her name is Nadia. It's just past 10 on a Wednesday night. She's sitting at her kitchen table with her laptop open, not doing anything in particular, just the low-grade administrative drift that fills the hours after the kids are in bed. She's got a browser tab open with her utility account on it. She's looking at last month's bill. She's not panicking. She's just doing that quiet mental arithmetic that most adults do alone in the kitchen after everyone else has gone to sleep. Trying to figure out where the number came from. She used ChatGPT 3 times that week to help draft emails. She's got a smart thermostat. She tries, she really does. She has no idea that a data center 2 states away, running models not that different from the one she used to draft those emails, consumed more electricity last month than her entire neighborhood. She has no idea that her utility company is in active negotiations to prioritize power delivery to that facility. She has no idea that the rate structure quietly governing her bill was partially redesigned to accommodate exactly that kind of industrial demand. She just knows the number went up, and she doesn't know why. That's the part nobody is explaining, so let's explain it. Here's the thing about electricity: it was never really cheap. It just felt manageable because the big consumers of it were fairly predictable. Factories, office buildings, hospitals. The grid was built around known, modelable demand. Utilities could forecast what was coming and price accordingly. That model is breaking. Between 2022 and 2024, electricity demand from data centers in the United States grew at a rate the grid hadn't seen in over 2 decades. Not from all technology, specifically from AI infrastructure, training large language models, running inference at scale, cooling the servers that do both. A single large AI training run can consume as much electricity as hundreds of homes use in a year, and that's one run, one model, one version. These companies run thousands of experiments, thousands of fine-tuning processes, thousands of daily inference requests from millions of users. The number you need to sit with for a moment is this. By some current projections, AI data centers could account for somewhere between 8 and 15% of total U.S. electricity consumption by 2030. That's not a fringe estimate. That's the range utilities are actually planning around. 8 to 15% of the entire national grid, for an industry that barely registered as a rounding error 5 years ago. Remember that range, 8 to 15, we'll come back to it. Now here's where it starts to shift. You might be thinking, okay, but that's a lot of demand. Doesn't that mean electricity companies are making more money? Shouldn't that make my rates lower, not higher? And I know exactly what that logic feels like because it's intuitive. More customers, more revenue, lower prices per unit, basic economics. But electricity doesn't work like a streaming service. You can't just spin up more servers when demand spikes. You have to build physical infrastructure, power lines, substations, transmission capacity, sometimes entirely new generation sources, and all of that costs money that has to come from somewhere before the new revenue fully arrives. That gap between what it costs to build the infrastructure AI demand requires and what the utility currently collects gets filled through rate adjustments, which is a very calm, bureaucratic phrase for your bill goes up. And here's the part that takes this from frustrating to genuinely strange. In many cases, the AI companies themselves are getting better deals than you are. Not dramatically better, not in a way that makes headlines, but utilities negotiating large industrial contracts with hyperscale data centers often offer custom rate structures, long-term agreements with cost certainty, efficiency incentives, sometimes direct investment in grid expansion. The AI company knows exactly what it's paying for a decade of compute. You're on a variable residential rate that moves with the market, the season, the regulatory environment, and whatever infrastructure project the utility just got approved. You are the flexible variable in this equation, they are the locked-in constant. This is where I want to stop for a second and be honest about something because I can feel the objection forming. You might be thinking this sounds like a conspiracy theory. Utilities don't actually target individual customers. Rate structures aren't designed to protect corporations at the expense of homeowners. That's not how regulation works. And you're right that it's not a conspiracy. Nobody sat in a room and decided to make Nadia's bill go up. That's not what's happening. What's happening is structural, not intentional, and structural problems are often harder to solve than intentional ones. Because at least with intentional wrongdoing, you can find someone to hold accountable. Here's the actual mechanism. Public utility commissions, the regulatory bodies that approve rate changes, are under enormous pressure to keep the grid stable as AI demand surges. Grid stability is not abstract. It's hospitals, water treatment, traffic systems. So when a utility comes to them with a proposal to fund infrastructure upgrades and asks for a residential rate adjustment to partially support those upgrades, the commission often approves it. Because the alternative is instability, and instability is a worse political outcome than a modestly higher residential rate. The AI companies, meanwhile, are not villains in this story. They're just very large customers doing what large customers do, negotiating the best possible deal for their own operations. The system allows it, so they use it. The result is that the cost of building the infrastructure AI requires gets socialized across the residential customer base. You and Nadia and everyone else with a household account absorbs a share of it, spread thin enough that it doesn't feel like a policy decision. It just feels like a bill that keeps quietly going up. That's not a conspiracy, that's a rate structure, and rate structures don't make the news. Let's talk about what this actually means for your money. The average American household spends somewhere between $1,200 and $2,000 a year on electricity, depending on region and usage. That range is already wider than it was 5 years ago. Forecasters at several major utilities are projecting further residential rate increases, in some markets, somewhere between 15 and 30%, over the next 3 to 5 years, with AI infrastructure demand cited as one of the primary drivers. Let's use a conservative number. Say your bill goes up 20% over 4 years. If you're currently at $1,500 a year, that's an extra $300 annually you didn't budget for. Over a decade, assuming the trend holds, you're looking at somewhere in the range of $2,000 to $4,000 in cumulative additional cost, not from anything you changed, not from any decision you made. From a structural shift in the grid that you had no vote on and received no notification about. That's before we talk about what happens in high-demand markets. California, Texas, parts of the Northeast. In some of these regions, the projections are steeper, and the households least positioned to absorb those increases, renters, fixed-income households, people already spending a disproportionate share of income on utilities, are going to feel it first and most. There's something quietly uncomfortable about this specific inequality. The people most likely to be using AI tools, in professional settings, in higher-income jobs, in industries where AI saves them measurable time and money, are also the most insulated from the energy cost that AI generates. The people least likely to benefit from AI productivity gains are absorbing a larger share of their income into the infrastructure that makes those gains possible. That's not an opinion, that's just arithmetic applied to who uses what and who pays for what. Now, about that range I told you to remember, 8 to 15% of total US electricity consumption. Here's why that number carries so much weight. At 8%, AI data centers are a very large sector, comparable to, say, the entire commercial lighting industry. Significant but manageable within existing grid expansion plans, rate pressure on households is real but gradual. At 15%, the picture changes. That's approaching the electricity demand of the entire American residential sector for air conditioning, one of the most power-intensive uses of energy in the country. At 15%, utilities aren't adjusting at the margins anymore. They're in fundamental restructuring territory, new generation capacity, potentially new nuclear, certainly new transmission. All of it requiring investment, all of it requiring recovery, all of it showing up somewhere in your bill. And the current trajectory is pointing closer to 15 than 8. Some of the largest AI labs in the world are in active negotiations to build private power infrastructure, dedicated generation facilities attached directly to their data centers. Microsoft, Google, Amazon have all made public commitments or signed agreements in this direction. Some of this is solar and wind. Some of it is reactivated nuclear capacity. The 3 Mile Island reactor that shut down in 2019, Microsoft agreed to purchase all output from its restart for 20 years. On one level, this is responsible. These companies are building their own supply rather than compressing the shared grid further. On another level, it reveals something about what they know about the grid's future that they haven't said plainly. Companies don't spend billions on private power infrastructure because they think the shared grid will stay cheap and stable. They do it because they've modeled what's coming and decided that vertical integration is the better bet. They've already made their decision. Most residential customers haven't been told there's a decision to make. So what do you actually do with this? Because this is the part where a lot of finance content fails. It spends 17 minutes explaining the problem with visible outrage and then offers you 3 tips about turning off your power strip when you leave the room. And you can feel the tonal whiplash from across the internet. This is a structural problem. Individual behavior on its own won't solve it, but individual awareness applied to specific decisions can meaningfully change your position within it. Those are not the same thing. First, energy cost is now a legitimate factor in housing decisions in a way it wasn't 5 years ago. Not the dominant factor, but a real one. If you're considering a move, a lease renewal, a home purchase, the utility cost trajectory for that specific region is worth researching. Not the current bill, the projected rate trend. Many state utility commissions publish 5-year rate forecasts. They are deeply boring documents. They are also more financially relevant to your household than most of the financial content you'll ever consume. Second, the rate structure on your current account may not be the only option. Many utilities offer time-of-use rates pricing that charges less for electricity consumed during off-peak hours. If your life allows any flexibility in when you run major appliances, this can meaningfully reduce your bill. It's not a revolution. It's a rate structure arbitrage available to anyone who knows to ask for it. Most people never ask. Third, the political mechanism here is real, even if slow. Public utility commissions are regulatory bodies with public comment processes. They are not immune to organized residential pressure. Several states are currently considering legislation that would require utilities to demonstrate that large industrial customer agreements don't result in disproportionate cost shifting to residential accounts. If this issue matters to you beyond your own bill, that's the level where engagement has leverage. Not a tweet, a public comment, a state representative. The boring machinery of regulation is where this actually gets changed. None of this is a complete answer, but each of these is a real one. And the difference between understanding a problem structurally and just being angry about it is knowing where the actual leverage points are. Nadia closed her laptop around 11. She didn't resolve anything that night. She never does. None of us do in the kitchen at 11 with cold coffee and a bill that doesn't explain itself. But there's something different about understanding the source of a pressure versus just feeling it. The pressure doesn't go away, but it stops feeling random. And a problem that isn't random has edges. Edges you can think around, edges that other people with the right information and the right timing have actually navigated. The thing nobody tells you about the next 10 years of personal finance is that the line between your money decisions and technological infrastructure decisions is going to keep blurring. Your electricity bill is just the earliest, most visible place where that's already happening. The same logic large industrial players shaping shared infrastructure costs in ways that get distributed across household budgets is not unique to energy. It's a pattern. And patterns, once you see them, tend to be everywhere. And once you see this one, once you see the mechanism, not just the monthly number, you start asking different questions. Not why is my bill high, but who decided how this cost gets distributed and why did they decide that way? Those are better questions. They're uncomfortable questions, but they're the ones that actually lead somewhere. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you already know this isn't a place for motivation or generic advice. It's a place where the actual numbers get examined, the actual psychology, the actual structures that most personal finance content skips because they're complicated and uncomfortable and don't resolve neatly into a 5-step list. If that's the kind of content you want more of, we're here every week, not to make you feel better about money, to make you see it more clearly, which, eventually, is the same thing. This video ends here, but the pattern it described doesn't. The next time you see a headline about AI investment, about a new model, a new data center, a new partnership between a tech company and a power utility, you'll read it differently now. Not with alarm, with a specific kind of recognition. You'll know what that announcement means for the grid. You'll know what it eventually means for the line item on your bill. You'll know that you're part of the equation and that being part of the equation, consciously, is a different position than being surprised by it every month in your kitchen. That's not a small thing, most people never get there.